Over the course of the last several days, I've been playing almost exclusively with the Heavy Bolter on my Heavy class, maxing it out to Relic tier and seeing what perk combinations feel the best on it. And in my class tier list, I did kind of take a bit of a BM on the Heavy Bolter, no lie. And some people in the comment section weighed in and were like, I think you need to give it another shot. So my recent days with it have helped me form a newfound respect for the weapon. All the gameplay in the background here will be on the Ruthless tier, some of it with the green version of the Bolter, some with the purple, and some at the Relic tier. So I'll give the Heavy Bolter an actual score out of 10 by the end of the video, so you have a bit of a numerical value for my own personal opinion of the thing at the end of all this. But let's dive into the weapon, starting with its core identity and what it's designed to do. The Heavy Bolter, like other heavy weapons, doesn't have magazines. It never needs to be reloaded. Picking up ammo off the ground just goes straight into your reserves and requires no animation. The main purpose of the Heavy Bolter is just to lay down a steady stream of lead from the edges of the battlefield. Your goal is to keep all hostiles in front of you and keep up a continuous stream of supporting fire for your teammates. It works best in conjunction with teammates who are more aggressive in their positioning, like assaults, vanguards, and bulwarks. You can be especially helpful by priming majors and getting them executable, and then leaving them alone for your teammates to finish off to restore their armor charges. While the Multi-Melta excels at point-blank crowd control, the Heavy Bolter works best at a medium to long range, chewing through the chaff on the field, and is really all about being able to read the whole battlefield instead of being in the middle of it with less awareness of the whole situation. When you play the Heavy Bolter like this, you're going to be keeping up pound for pound with max level snipers in terms of ranged damage. Now, the Multi-Melta is incredible at ad control, but it isn't quite as strong against Terminus enemies. And I know I always have people argue that point when I say that. They say, no, you can get right underneath the Neurothropes or barrel stuff the Hellbrutes. And, that's true. You can do that, and you can dish out decent damage. But I'm absolutely telling you the truth here, as someone who has maxed out every class in the game. I've got Relic tier Meltas. I've had Relic tier tons of different guns in the game. Listen, Meltas are not as good, period, against single targets. The amount of damage output against a Neurothrope with a Multi-Melta compared to the Heavy Bolter is no comparison. The Heavy Bolter is going to double it at least. And you can be at a safe distance reading the tells of the incoming attacks better with a wider perspective with the Bolter as well. And that's one of the things that I like most about the Heavy Bolter, is just how versatile it is. If you want to clear ads, you can clear ads and shoot through mobs. If you want to lay down some serious gunfire against Terminus bosses that spawn, you can easily do that too. And you're not going to be taking a lot of damage either if you're playing to the strengths of the Heavy Bolter. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that it's better than the Multi-Melta. The Multi-Melta excels very well at crowd control up close. And the Heavy Bolter is more like, I can do crowd control really well, maybe not quite as well, but I can do it really well, but from a safer distance. So it's a more conservative pick, and it has more versatility over multiple different scenarios. Now, the Bolter, like most weapons in the game, gets a lot better once you fully invest in the perk tree. Let me go over how I built mine. You'll notice I don't have a single point in the final section of the perk tree. Instead, I went with a much more well-rounded approach. The goal was to end up with a highly accurate Bolter so I don't waste ammo and can consistently hit consecutive headshots from further away, while also making sure I had a lot of extra damage when it comes to heavy stance. So we've got Perpetual Cooling for slower overheating of the weapon, Headhunter for extra headshot damage, which does add up very quickly when beaming Terminus enemies in the face. We've got Increased Capacity for more ammo reserves, Heavy Immunity, so we can't get knocked down while in the heavy stance, so we can really hold our ground. Perpetual Penetration, so we can over-penetrate enemies to hit more behind them. Adamant Hunter, for a huge buff to headshot damage when our health is low. And then 2 stacks of Heavy Precision for a net 20% reduction to our maximum spread in heavy stance, making the weapon much more accurate while holding down the trigger. And also 2 stacks of Heavy Might for a net 30% buff to our damage when in the heavy stance. And lastly, I am using the Gathalamor Crusade Alpha version of the gun for a big bump in accuracy. So you get the idea here. The gun is going to be more accurate, and it's going to do a lot more damage while we are in our heavy stance. We're going to lean into this a little bit more with our heavy class perk selections too, using Restoration to give us an armor charge when we get big multi-kills, which we will be doing a lot of that. You'll see me getting free armor charges right and left in the background gameplay as we're chewing through big groups of ads. We're using Strategic Stand, which gives us more contested health back when in the heavy stance, but it also makes it so that we can't move in the heavy stance. We're rooted like a tree, which is actually not a bad trade-off at all. First time I read that, I was like, well, that sounds like it sucks. Well, if you're using the bolter correctly, you probably don't need to move, or you don't need to be hyper-mobile while you're laying down heavy fire. And then finally, Brute Force for yet another 15% damage boost to our weapon when Iron Halo is not cooled down yet. So we are really good at holding our ground and dishing out absurd amounts of damage with the heavy bolter. And while I find the multi-melta to be exceedingly boring to use on heavy, it's the best pick, but it is boring to me. The heavy bolter on the flip side is actually quite fun to lean into. So one skill you need to get good at is definitely knowing how and when to swap back and forth from heavy stance to standard stance. You'll notice when enemies start getting really close to me, I'm bouncing in and out of heavy stance and adjusting as needed. Sometimes I need to quickly deactivate it and dodge. Other times I hold my ground, knowing that 10 kills will get that armor charge right back. Polite reminder, you can parry while in the heavy stance, but you cannot dodge. So you can wait for those blue attacks, but if you see them winding up for an orange attack, you'll need to deactivate the heavy stance and then dodge. And I'll also mention that there's virtually no reason to use your melee attack now that parrying Minoris enemies restores armor charges. Literally shoot your guns and parry the tiny folk when you need it. And speaking of guns, I do prefer to run the plasma pistol in conjunction with the heavy bolter for those quick interruptions to calls for aid and big chunk damage on large targets when necessary. And so, considering the role the heavy bolter needs to fill and how well it does it, for me, I think the heavy bolter deserves a score of 7.8 out of 10. I think it's really close to being an 8. The only thing that I think I would want to see on it is a more reliable way to generate extra ammo without having to take damage to do it. I would prefer a perk that rewards you for killing and taking little damage as opposed to the adamant restoration options that reward you for getting hurt a lot. If I'm playing very well, I want to be paid handsomely in bullets for my performance. So I think that would be the only thing that would bump this up into the 8s for me. Ultimately, the heavy bolter is a lot of fun to use. Probably the most fun primary for the heavy class for me personally. It lays down big damage from downtown very accurately when you build it for that, and it can hang with the big damage dealing classes out there. And so I do recommend, ultimately, the heavy bolter for heavy players out there looking to have a lot more fun on the field. Thanks so much for watching the video today, and a big shout out to our Discord community and the guys who were featured in the fire teams in the gameplay today. Our community is now over 100 Astartes brothers strong, and we have groups gaming and farming together morning, afternoon, and evening every day at this point. If that's something you think you might want to get involved in, maybe you're tired of just randomly matchmaking and kind of playing a bit of a crapshoot game with the kinds of teammates that you might get, hey, check the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment and click on that super cheap $3 tier. Joining that tier and linking your Discord account to your Patreon account in your Patreon account settings will then sync up your Discord to your Patreon and give you access to our private Discord so you can see the Space Marines rooms for general chat, for LFG, and all the fire team chat rooms as well. If you have trouble linking them up, just DM me on the Patreon and we will get you sorted. Thanks for all the love and support on my Space Marines videos. It's been my genuine pleasure to play and cover this game and meet so many awesome gamers through our community. Be warm and well fed, my friends. Courage and honor.